You know that feeling when you've read, I don't know, a dozen articles, but you still feel like you're just skimming the surface.
Yeah, like there's something deeper, more fundamental, just out of reach.
Exactly. That's the itch we really aim to scratch here on the deep dive. We take these compelling ideas and, well, we try to dig down, find those illuminating insights.
And today's dive, oh, it takes us to some fascinatingly intertwined territories. We're setting out to explore these surprising echoes
That goes between what exactly?
between ancient Gnostic wisdom, specifically from the Gospel of Thomas and the Book of Thomas the Contender, and the profound esoteric philosophy of H.P. Blavatsky.
Right, Blavatsky. We're drawing from her more sort of intimate teachings, aren't we?
That's the plan? Her private instructions, mainly?
Think about the sheer scope here. You've got these cryptic sayings attributed to Jesus, passed down in secret for ages. And then you have this really detailed cosmological, psychological framework from Blavatsky, who's just such a pivotal figure in modern esoteric thought.
Absolutely. So our mission for you today, listening in, is really to see where these seemingly, disparate streams converge.
What can they tell us together about reality, our place in it, maybe even about the path toward inner awakening?
It's a chance, I think, to gain a really fresh perspective on ideas that have captivated people and mystified them for centuries.
Okay, so where do we even begin to unpack something like this? It feels huge.
It is. But a truly compelling point of convergence, I think, is they're shared, and it's quite intense. Emphasis on the need to renounce the material world.
Renounce the world, okay.
Yeah, the Gnostic perspective, you see it powerfully in the Thomas text, views our attachments, our deep attachments to the physical realm, as a primary hindrance, an obstacle to spiritual enlightenment.
Absolutely. It hits you right away in the Gospel of Thomas. You got Jesus saying things like, become passersby.
Such a striking image.
Isn't it? Don't settle. Don't get overly invested in the here and now of the material stuff. And then there's that very direct instruction, let him renounce the world, given to someone who's just acquired wealth. That's pretty radical.
It is radical.
Why such a strong emphasis, do you think? What's behind it?
Well, the underlying reason, it seems, in both traditions, is that this material world, it's just not seen as the ultimate reality, not the enduring reality, anyway.
Right.
And when we turn to Blavatsky's teachings, her concept of Maya, often translated as illusion, it provides a deeper philosophical frame for this.
Blavia, illusion.
Okay. She describes the objective universe itself as a passing illusion, even considers life and death as just aspects, illusions, really, changes of state.
Wow. So this renunciation isn't about denying existence then?
No, not exactly. It's more about recognizing its transient nature. Blavatsky talks about a physical Maya veil, like something obscuring a deeper reality.
A veil. Got it. So renouncing the world isn't necessarily about like packing up and becoming a hermit.
Precisely. It's more about shifting our fundamental perception, what is truly real and valuable.
And that connects, I guess, to those really harsh-sounding things Jesus says about hating family, right? That always throws people.
It does. That saying, whoever does not hate his father and his mother cannot become a disciple to me, it can be incredibly jarring if you take it literally.
Yeah, you think.
But esoterically, the hate here, it signifies a radical realignment of priorities.
Ah, okay. Priorities.
It's about recognizing that our deepest allegiance has to shift away from worldly ties, no matter how important they seem, towards the pursuit of the spiritual path.
So it's metaphorical hate.
You could say that. And Blavatsky echoes this with her insistence on overcoming personal attachments, selfish desires. She sees them as chains, basically, binding the soul to lower, more illusory realms.
Chains.
She even talks about needing to actively kill all such tendencies of personal attachment when you're really dedicated to inner work. Serious stuff.
So it's about prioritizing that inner journey, full stop, even if it puts you at odds with, conventional expectations. And this idea of a dedicated path, maybe even a solitary one, that resonates with the Gnostic idea of the solitary and elect, doesn't it?
Precisely. Blessed are the solitary and elect, for you will find the kingdom. Solitary person here.
Yeah.
Well, it's often interpreted as someone who's started to detach.
Detach from what?
From the shared illusions, the unexamined beliefs of the masses. Someone who, through their own inner striving, has been, chosen for a deeper connection.
Chosen by whom? Or what?
Chosen for that connection to the divine, let's say. And Blavatsky similarly describes the journey of the esoteric student as this often arduous uphill work of self-purification.
Uphill work. Sounds about right.
And this path, focused on inner transformation, it can naturally feel distinct, separate from the concerns of the wider world.
Then you have that really stark Gnostic statement, whoever has come to understand the world has found only a corpse. Well, it's pretty bleak.
It sounds bleak, yeah.
What's the underlying idea there? Is it just nihilism?
I don't think the intent is just morbidity. It's highlighting the Gnostic view that the material world, if you look at it in isolation from its spiritual source, it lacks true enduring life.
Oh, okay. Lacks life.
It's seen as transient, ultimately decaying. And Blavatsky's teachings reinforce this. She describes the physical body as just an upadhi.
Oh, what now?
An upadhi, like a material rind, a vehicle for the soul. And the terrestrial world itself is Malkuth.
Malkuth. Sounds familiar. Kabbalah.
Exactly. In Kabbalistic terms, it's the densest, lowest sphere of Maya. So, encountering the world as a corpse signifies recognizing its lack of inherent, eternal spiritual vitality.
Okay, that makes more sense than just everything is dead. Now, the Book of Thomas the Contender uses incredibly vivid imagery talking about escaping the burning of the senses and finding wings to flee every visible thing. It paints this picture of a desperate need for liberation, doesn't it?
It really does. That lust that scorches the spirits. It lines very closely with Blavatsky's concept of kama.
Kama, desire, passion.
Exactly. Desire and passion. And when it's uncontrolled, kama acts like a fire. It consumes the soul's energies, binds it to the impermanent realms of sensation.
Sounds dangerous.
Blavatsky considered kama the seed of our more, let's say, animalistic instincts. And she taught that the lower manas, our everyday thinking mind, can easily become enslaved by these desires.
So the wings to flee symbolize?
They symbolize developing our higher spiritual faculties, what Blavatsky called buddhimanas, the spiritual soul, the higher intellect. These allow the soul to transcend the limits of the physical senses, the illusions of Maya.
And the consequences in the Gnostic view for getting caught up in all this, they sound pretty severe. Becoming blinded, chained, even regressing to filthy beasts. That's a powerful warning.
It is. And Blavatsky's teachings offer an esoteric explanation for these potential pitfalls.
How so?
Well, if the lower manas becomes completely identified with, dominated by Kalamala, it risks severing its connection with the higher ego, our true individual spiritual essence.
Severing the connection. What happens then?
Her instructions even speak of soul death as a possible outcome in that scenario.
Soul death, really?
Yes, where the personal consciousness developed in a lifetime is essentially annihilated.
Ugh.
And the leftover karmic energies can even contribute to forming lower astral entities. Nasty stuff.
Wow. Okay, so the Gnostic warning about becoming a servant of death by indulging in the sweetness of the passionate fire, that resonates deeply with Blavatsky's view on unchecked desire.
Very deeply. The peril is real in both systems.
Okay, so there's this clear agreement on the potential dangers, the illusions, the attachments, but surely both traditions also point towards something more profound, more real within us.
Oh, absolutely. This leads us right to the core idea of the divine spark within.
The divine spark.
It's central to both. The Gospel of Thomas has that powerful declaration, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you.
When you come to know yourselves, you will realize that you are the sons of the living Father. Yeah, I remember that one.
Exactly. It's not about some distant external heaven. It's about a divine reality that is inherently present, right here, inside each of us.
Which aligns remarkably well with Blavatsky's concept of the higher self, that trinity. Atma, spirit, buddhi, spiritual soul, and manas, higher mind, this indwelling divine spark.
Yes, like we each carry a fragment of the divine within, emanating from what she calls the one universal self.
She even says, quite directly, man knows Father only what knows of self. It's about that direct inner knowing, isn't it?
Precisely. And that Gnostic saying, that which you have will save you if you bring it forth from yourselves.
Bring it forth.
It speaks directly to this innate potential. Liberation isn't granted from outside, it's an active process. Realizing, actualizing the spiritual power lying dormant within.
And Blavatsky echoes this.
Absolutely. She teaches that humans possess all the fundamental powers of nature, just latent. We're identical in spiritual and physical essence with both the absolute principle and with God in nature. The bringing forth is the awakening of this higher self.
And then you have Jesus identifying himself as the light which is above them all, asserting his presence in all things.
Right. Split a piece of wood and I am there. Lift up the stone and you will find me there.
That sounds like a very pervasive sense of divinity everywhere.
And Blavatsky's esoteric interpretation sees this through the lens of the Christos principle.
Christos, not just Jesus the man.
Not just a historical figure, no, but the universal divine light, the Logos, the very principle of consciousness and being that permeates all existence.
So that aligns with her Atma Buddhimanas, the self.
Directly. The ultimate aim, according to her teachings, is to achieve harmony with one's own God-I, one's archetypal ancestor, our own seventh principle, Atma. It's recognizing that universal light within ourselves.
So establishing that connection with the deeper universal aspect residing in our own being. Okay. And the Book of Thomas the Contender talks about gnosis, that direct knowing.
Yes, experiential knowledge.
Leading to profound, lasting peace, a state of being unafraid once this truth is realized. That sounds incredibly transformative.
It is. The theosophical goal, achieving union with the higher self, aims for precisely that state, often described as samadhi or tuya.
Higher states of consciousness.
Exactly. States transcending the limitations, the disturbances of our ordinary awareness. Blavatsky called it nirvanic consciousness, a state beyond pain, misery, change.
Rested upon it forever and was unafraid. That really captures it, doesn't it?
Beautifully encapsulates that ultimate liberation.
This intense inner focus, it naturally leads to thinking about unity, doesn't it? If this divine essence is within us all, then the separation we feel every day must be, well, fundamentally an illusion.
Exactly. The Gnostic concept of transcending duality, making the two into one, is absolutely central here.
Jesus' teachings on unifying inner and outer, above and below, male and female.
All pointing towards overcoming these perceived divisions.
And Blavatsky offers a specific take on what these two represent, right?
Yes, she sees them primarily as the distinction between our lower personal self, our ego, our physical being, and the higher divine self.
The lower and the higher.
Right. And the spiritual path, in her view, involves consciously working to harmonize our everyday consciousness with our deeper spiritual essence. She even uses symbolic language, like enclosing the square, the four lower principles within the triangle of the higher spiritual triad.
Square and the triangle. Okay, interesting image.
Precisely. And the Gnostic idea of making the male and the female into a single one. It finds a fascinating parallel in Blavatsky's teachings on primordial androgyny.
Androgyny, like before gender separation.
The idea of a unified state of being before the differentiation of sexes, yes. And the understanding that the ultimate spiritual state transcends these dualistic distinctions. It's about returning to a spiritual wholeness that underlies these separations.
And the emphasis in the Gnostic texts on becoming single or solitary to enter the bridal chamber, that sounds like achieving an internal state of non-duality, shedding the illusion of separateness.
It does indeed. Blavatsky strongly emphasizes that the very sense of separateness, what's called ahankara, the I maker, is the root illusion.
Ahankara, the I maker.
It's the fundamental aspect of Maya that our lower mind perpetuates. But in fundamental reality, she taught, all souls are fundamentally identical with the universal oversoul.
All souls identical. Wow.
There's this indissoluble link between our individual higher egos and the one universal self. Even our Atma, that highest aspect, isn't truly separate ultimately. It's like sunlight shines on all.
Like sunlight, a universal principle manifesting individually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when the Gnostic texts talk about dissolving duality into a single unity, it aligns perfectly with the theosophical path of realizing the underlying interconnectedness, the fundamental oneness of everything.
Now, this journey, realizing unity, divinity, it doesn't sound like a walk in the park in either tradition.
Definitely not.
There seems to be a significant emphasis on purification even. Well, even the necessity of suffering.
Indeed. That Gnostic saying, "Blessed is the man who has suffered and found life," suggests that confronting hardship, enduring it, can be a powerful catalyst for spiritual awakening.
A cattle.
And the concept of being persecuted within themselves as a prerequisite for truly knowing the Father, that implies a deep, often challenging inner struggle.
And Blavatsky certainly doesn't sugarcoat the esoteric path either, does she?
Not at all. She actually suggests that committing to it can stir up all our hidden flaws, latent desires, forces us to confront aspects of ourselves we might rather avoid.
So an intense internal battle is almost expected.
Almost a given. Her master's admonition on purity and the golden stairs allegory, they outline a rigorous ethical framework.
What does it demand?
A clean life, a pure heart, courageous endurance of personal injustice. She emphasizes the absolute necessity of subjugating the flesh and crushing material instincts.
Crushing instincts, strong words.
Essential steps, in her view, to overcome the dominance of kama and purify the lower nature.
The Book of Thomas the Contender's call to flee from every material body and to actively crucify wickedness. That really echoes this idea, doesn't it? Needing to detach from the lower self, combat negativity.
It aligns directly with theosophical teachings. The need to progressively detach from the illusions and pulls of the physical and astral bodies are emotional, energetic vehicles.
And mastering the animal soul.
Exactly. Mastering those instinctual, lower desires. Both traditions, though using different metaphors, clearly see this inner confrontation, this purification, as absolutely essential for the soul's ascent, for liberation.
And this whole transformative process, purification, awakening, seems tied inextricably to hidden knowledge. Gnosis. The Gospel of Thomas kicks off immediately referring to secret sayings.
Exactly. At its core, Gnosticism emphasizes direct, personal, often hidden experiential knowledge, gnosis as the key.
And Blavatsky.
Her Theosophy is also presented as a wisdom religion, a secret doctrine, an ancient body of profound truths revealed gradually.
Why secret?
She explains why some knowledge is guarded, its sacred nature, the potential dangers if misused by those not spiritually ready.
Right, responsibility. And within the Thomas texts, Jesus acts as a guide, a kind of guru, right? Imparting these secrets. That teacher-student dynamic feels important.
It is, very much so. And it mirrors the importance of the teacher-student relationship in Blavatsky's system, too.
But there's a catch.
Well, it's crucial to understand that both traditions ultimately point beyond any external authority figure, towards the higher self as the ultimate, the true inner teacher.
The master within.
Exactly. Blavatsky's instructions often encourage students to focus their concentration, their devotion, on this inner master, the primary source of strength, wisdom, illumination, the direct voice of their own higher self.
So external guidance helps, but the ultimate source is internal. Always comes back to that. Now, what about reincarnation? Blavatsky details it extensively, but the Gnostic texts.
That's a key difference in emphasis, definitely. Yeah. The Gnostic texts don't lay out a detailed doctrine like Blavatsky does, but there are suggestive passages.
Suggestive how?
Well, Blavatsky's teachings provide a much broader framework for the soul's journey over time. Reincarnation, karma, explaining the ego's evolution through multiple lifetimes, learning, growing.
So the Book of Thomas the Contender's imagery, like souls returning to matter,
could certainly be interpreted through that broader theosophical lens of repeated earthly lives.
Makes sense. And ultimately, both are aiming beyond the cycle.
Yes. The overarching goal is transcending the limitations of the cycle of earthly existence through spiritual realization.
And finally, all this discussion really brings us back to the fundamental duality in human nature, that powerful Gnostic line. I'm amazed how this great wealth spirit has made its home in this poverty flesh.
It captures it beautifully, succinctly.
How does Blavatsky frame that?
It perfectly reflects her core understanding of the human being as a composite entity.
Composite.
The divine, eternal higher triad intimately linked with, inhabiting, the mortal, impermanent, lower quaternary body, life force, emotions, lower mind.
Higher and lower again.
She often described our consciousness as inherently dualistic. Higher aspects drawn to the spiritual soul, lower aspects drawn towards desires, towards kama.
So the path is?
The spiritual path, essentially, is the process of consciously resolving this inner conflict, increasingly identifying with our true, eternal spiritual nature. Spirit over flesh, basically.
So, wow. As we've navigated these ancient Gnostic writings and Blavatsky's deep esoteric teachings, we've really uncovered some striking parallels, thought-provoking stuff.
Definitely.
This shared understanding, releasing the grip on illusion, finding the divine spark within, the journey to unity, the need for purification, inner knowledge, that dual nature.
And ultimately, both the Gnostic wisdom in Thomas and Blavatsky's intricate philosophy, they converge on this central liberating truth.
Which is?
That genuine liberation, true fulfillment, arises from awakening. Profound, transformative awakening to the authentic divine self at the core of every single one of us.
It really does give you pause, doesn't it? I mean, take a moment. Just consider how deeply ingrained our focus on the material world usually is.
And how maybe shifting even slightly towards seeing its potential illusoriness. How might that change your perspective? On daily life, on what you think brings real happiness?
It's a big question.
And what about that inherent divine spark within you, What would it actually mean to actively nurture that, to cultivate that inner connection? These are huge ideas.
Vast and profound. And we've only just scratched the surface of their interconnectedness today.
Indeed. So, for those of you listening whose curiosity has been, well, seriously piqued by this deep dive into Gnosticism and theosophical thought,
we wholeheartedly encourage you to delve further. Read the Gospel of Thomas, the Book of Thomas the Contender. Explore the extensive writings of H.P. Blavatsky.
There's a real wealth of timeless wisdom out there just waiting for your exploration.